At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Spotify.
This podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care of yourself.
Let's get into the early life of Robert Tyrone Hayes. Hit it, Beth.
So Robert Tyrone Hayes was born on March 12, 1982 in West Palm Beach, Florida, the youngest of 5 children. His father was murdered when he was still a baby, and the family lived in poverty. According to Robert's sister, Terrace Collins, there were decades of sexual abuse in the family and a lot of violence and aggression.
Robert was a gifted student, but was often bullied by other kids. A clinical psychologist who met with him and some of his family members for his eventual trial testified that growing up, Robert was exposed to violence, both physical and sexual.
A doctor who testified at trial said that there was evidence that Robert had at some point suffered a traumatic brain injury, and the doctor thought that he might be on the autism spectrum.
That's interesting information. Robert's sister, Terrace, described how, as children, they were severely disciplined to a point of physical abuse so that they would not get into trouble outside of the home. And she explained that this was common in Black families because if the kids got into trouble outside of the home, they could be killed.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I was just with family this last weekend. We were like, remember when we used to get our ass beat by our parents? Isn't that funny? And like,
hilarious.
Isn't abuse hilarious? Do you remember when you had to go get a switch from the outside?
Oh, God.
And we were just just
commiserating.
Yeah, about the old days.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So after graduating from high school, Robert attended Bethune-Cookman University in Daytona Beach, Florida. He was a student there from 2000 to 2006. He also had a security guard license at the time.
During his time at BCU, Hayes, who stood 6'4" and weighed 220 pounds, so big fella, was also a cheerleader and a member of the Criminal Justice Association. Those are good things.
Yeah.
Hayes is pictured several times in BCU's 2006 yearbook as both a cheerleader and with his criminal justice classmates.
Yeah, I saw some of those pictures, and he is a big dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say.
Called Squeaky by friends and family, I don't know why, but he was known to be helpful and was described as someone who was always there for people and friendly with neighbors. Robert loved cooking and cooking for people.
Jason Caldwell, a friend from Hayes College, called Hayes a peacemaker. Quote, he was always the cool-headed person in the group, trying to talk things through versus altercations or getting physical, unquote.
Hayes' cousin Denise Williams said much the same. Quote, I have never seen Robert raise his voice, do anything outrageous, unquote.
Okay, let's get into the timeline, and I'm going to tell you what's next.
Okay, what's next?
So in 2005, Hayes was 22 years old and living in Daytona Beach, still attending college. At the beginning of December 2005, Hayes bought a Smith & Wesson .40 caliber Sigma Series VE handgun. That's a lot of information for a gun.
Yeah. I don't know what all that means, but
guess where he bought it.
It sounds fancy.
Guess where he bought it at?
Where'd he buy it?
Gun Rack in Daytona Beach, just off campus, only blocks from where he lived.
Just a few weeks later, the killings began. During the winter of 2005 to 2006, 3 women were killed in less than 3 months. The victims were described by police as sex workers, but some family members disagreed with that characterization.
Yeah, it seemed to me that they were very quick to assign them that descriptor.
Yeah.
And so, Beth, you mentioned that most of the victims were white, but there were a couple who were black.
Right.
And just wanted to talk about the sexualization of black and brown bodies. Quick culture corner with Wendy and Beth. So it's very complex. It has very deep roots. And some might look at somebody, I was just watching the BET Awards, Meg Thee Stallion or Cardi B, in the Wet Ass Pussy video, aka WAP, and clutch their pearls at the sight of a woman or femme liberated with her body and how she chooses to share it with the world, not really thinking about the colonial, patriarchal, capitalist, white supremacist history, which is bullshit. And so, for a long time, including to this day, and in this case, the hypersexualization of bodies that are black and brown and women, or femmes in particular, which, stems from the idea that a white body is normal. A white body is the default and otherizes everything else. So it makes it really easy to do horrific things to people if you don't see them as people, right? You just see them as others. So
not cool.
Nope. Anyway, back to the story.
Laquita Mae Gunther, 45, became the first victim. Laquita was a resident of Daytona Beach, and she was described by her family as a very smart and outgoing person. She was also known as a tough labor hall worker, which I had to look up what a labor hall worker was. Mm-hmm. It's a day laborer. Mm-hmm. Apparently she was a construction day laborer.
But working, getting after it.
Yeah.
Laquita was last seen on Christmas Eve 2005 at Chubby's Bar on Beach Street. That evening, Laquita had plans to prepare Christmas dinner with her friend Stacy Dittmer, but she never showed up.
On December 26, Laquita's body was found in a narrow space between 2 buildings across the street from Chubby's Bar. She was in a kneeling position and had no clothes on. She had been killed with a gunshot to the back of the head.
Less than a month later, Julie Ann Green, 34, a friend of Laquita's, became the second victim. On the night of January 13th, 2006, Julie, a mother of 4, told her boyfriend she was going to walk down the street to call her dad on a payphone. Remember those?
Yeah.
She never returned.
This episode is brought to you by Pluto TV. Are you looking for your next case? Pluto TV has all your favorite crime dramas streaming for free, which means suspicion is free, with countless cases to crack. Watch CSI, Criminal Minds, NCIS, Blue Bloods, Tracker, FBI, and SWAT, all for free from all your favorite devices. Feel the free. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
And we're back with Canva Presents Secret Sounds Work Edition. Caller, guess this sound.
It's a mouse click.
So close. That's actually publishing a website with Canva Docs. Next caller.
Definitely a mouse click.
Nice try. It was sorting 100 sticky notes with a Canva whiteboard. We also would have accepted resizing a Canva video into 10 different sizes.
What? No way.
Yes way. One click can go a long way. Love your work at canva.com.
Julie's body was found on January 14th, 2006, in a ditch near a construction site on LPGA Boulevard. She was nude and had 1 gunshot wound to the back of her head, just like Laquita. Officials were able to recover ballistic evidence.
Then, on February 24th, a little more than a month later, Iwana Patton, 35, became the 3rd victim of the serial killer. 2 people walking in a desolate wooded area off Williamson Boulevard spotted Iwana Patton's body and called the police. Her body was found in the same state as the last 2 victims, but instead of being shot in the back of the head, she had been shot in the face. So, right, that escalation, I think that's a sign of it, from going to killing somebody or like grabbing them from the back, but approaching them from the front.
Right.
Like, he's more brave now.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
According to a niece, Ioana was a caregiver, a nurse assistant, and medical technician, and she devoted her life to caregiving and her family. At the time of her death, her aunt was working 2 jobs and was helping her niece raise her 5 children. The niece denied that her aunt did drugs or sold sex for money and doesn't know how her aunt crossed paths with her killer. She suspected that he lured her by pretending to need help, which is something that Ted Bundy would do.
Right. And I think the parallel, it's interesting because we'll talk about it at the end of the case. This went on for a long time because nobody thought a serial killer could be black.
Right.
We'll get into it. So on March 10th, 2006, Daytona Beach police and state of Florida investigators announced that the 3 women were likely the victims of a serial killer. DNA evidence from Laquita and Julie's bodies matched, and the same Smith & Wesson 40 caliber I'm not saying the rest of those. The same 40 caliber
that handgun
had been used on all 3 victims.
Yeah, suffice it to say that it was the same type of gun that Hayes bought before the killings began. Yeah, from books. Mm-hmm. Florida Department of Law Enforcement profiler Tom Davis told Daytona Beach police that he thought that the killer was a white man who was acting out his frustrations on women. And at this point, there were only 3 victims. 2 of the victims were white. So he probably thought that the killer was white because the victims were mostly white.
Mm-hmm.
The profiler advised them to look for a white man with a girlfriend he resented, which triggered aggression towards women.
Oh, boy. Nobody saw it coming. You know what I mean? What did you guys think was going to happen?
Yeah.
So Hayes came up early in the investigation because he had bought the Smith & Wesson handgun around the time the first victim died, and police were looking at everyone who had purchased a similar gun.
But there was nothing else to raise a red flag. No felony convictions, no anonymous tips implicating him, no history of domestic violence. He seemed to be a well-adjusted college student. He was also only one of hundreds of people police interviewed at the time.
But Hayes told police that he had given the handgun to his mother, who lived in West Palm Beach. Then in December 2006, police had contact with Hayes again when he reported that his firearm was stolen. From his vehicle at Riviera Beach. Wasn't me, officer. It was stolen.
The murders in Daytona Beach caused a panic that led some of the area's sex workers to help detectives. They talked regularly with investigators and kept an eye out for suspicious activity. They memorized license plate numbers and vehicle descriptions of anyone they thought looked suspicious.
I think that's really cool how they, them as a community, the sex workers, banded together to protect themselves.
Yes.
I'm sure they were both getting something out of it, right? The police were getting information, but they were also, by giving them information, keeping their community of workers safe, right?
Yeah.
So, volunteers from a local ministry also worked to warn people of the murders, and they distributed flyers and hygiene kits to those living and working on the street, urging people not to walk alone at night.
But as the months went by, after police investigated hundreds of leads, the cases went cold. The killings appeared to stop. No other bodies were linked to the slayings, and the killer seemed to disappear.
Many theories were developed about the killer. Some thought that he might be a police officer. Maybe he's a military guy. Or that he was an outlaw biker. That one's funny. It was even thought the killer could have been a seasonal resident, a taxi cab driver, a trucker, or that he was dead.
Criminal profiler and author Pat Brown suggested that the killer just took a break from killing, saying, quote, maybe he's doing it on a spree when his life isn't doing so good. After killing, things in his life maybe got a little better and he won't do it for a while. A lot of serial killers are like that, unquote, and that's true.
Ah, yes. Thank you, OG of True Crime. She's here. So Hayes ended up graduating from BCU in 2006 with a degree in criminal justice. After graduating, he worked as a chef. Then on January 2nd, 2008, the nude body of a 4th woman was found in a wooded area near an abandoned church.
Stacy Charlene Gage was last seen alive on December 10th, 2007. A former drum majorette who dropped out of high school in her senior year, Stacy struggled with substance use. She was a single mother of 2 children, a girl and a boy. She was reported missing by her grandmother after she left to go to the convenience store to get a bag of ice, but never returned.
So I just wanted to say that the discipline and physical talent that a majorette has to have, I think is incredible.
Yeah.
And so knowing that about her, that she had that in her background and she was a mom taking care of 2 kids by herself.
Right.
I love that we have this information because we don't always get it in these kinds of cases with these kinds of victims. And I'm pleased that we get to know more about the humanity of these people.
Yeah.
It seems to me like she was just a human being just trying her best in very difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
But 3 weeks later, a few miles from where Stacy lived with her grandmother in Holly Hill, a middle-class suburb of Daytona Beach, Florida, police officer Chris Reeder parked on a secluded dead-end road near an abandoned church to do some paperwork. Doesn't that seem suspicious to you? Sorry.
I don't know. I don't know what police do, so yeah.
All right, just me.
He might have been watching people or doing paperwork. I don't know.
Okay.
But when he rolled down his window, he smelled something bad. He got out of his patrol car and began searching for the source of the smell. About 15 yards in from the road, Reeder's flashlight fell on the nude, decomposed body of a young woman who was later identified by her fingerprints as Stacy Gage.
Investigators said her death was eerily similar to the deaths of Laquita, Julie, and Iwana, and they suspected that her murder was linked. There was no DNA found on Stacy's nude body because she had been exposed to the elements for about a month before she was discovered, but the scene was similar.
The van Stacy had taken to get the bag of ice was found in the lot of an apartment complex popular with young single people and college students. It had been there, according to residents, for about a month, or roughly since Gage had driven off to buy a bag of ice. And I wonder if it was his apartment complex. Was he that brazen?
You mean our killer? Our
Hayes.
perp, Robert Hayes? He lived in that complex, you think?
Yeah. It did. Nothing said it was, but that would be crazy.
It would be crazy. I have mixed thoughts about his approach because he dumps them away, but he dumps them in places where they're found.
Yeah. He wanted them to be found.
Yeah. Other than that one, right? But most of them are found. The one that took maybe a month.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. True.
Not Laquita.
Stacy Gage.
Stacy Gage, yes.
Yeah. Other than that. But I think it was a fluke that she wasn't found because from what I read, that area was frequented by a lot of people. So I don't know why she wasn't found.
Oh. Well, yeah, this guy, I think he wants people to find his work.
Yeah.
Get into it later. In January 2008, authorities announced that the murder of Stacy Gage was also connected to the 3 previous homicides. Daytona Police Chief Mike Chitwood said that the locations where the killer dumped the bodies suggested to him that the killer knew the area very well.
Okay.
So now let's get into the investigation and the arrest. What do you got for us, Beth?
It was another 9 years before the killer struck again, or that we know of. And at this point, the media was referring to him as the Daytona Beach Killer or the Daytona Beach Serial Killer.
When you hear those words, though, is it just me? It just sounds, it must be a white person. I mean,
Daytona Beach makes you think of white people. Yeah.
I mean, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't just me. Okay, so
no,
Hayes,
not just you.
At some point, moved back home to West Palm Beach and was working as a chef. Remember, because he likes to cook for people. So he lived in an apartment off of North Flagler Drive with his girlfriend, Shawnee, and their baby daughter. He also had a daughter with another woman who lived in California.
And we also lived off of Flagler Drive, but I think it was South Flagler Drive.
What? That's crazy. Oh, my God. I don't even have a sound effect for that.
There you go.
The record scratch. Wow, that's so interesting. I love that connection to this case you've got.
I don't know if I love it, but there it is.
Well, I don't know. love is a word that comes out of my mouth a lot. I don't always mean it. So let's just move on.
Okay. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Daytona Beach Police, and retired investigators worked together for years on the case. There was a $20,000 reward put out for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer.
The story was featured on several TV programs focusing on serial killers. Police began taking DNA samples from men arrested for paying for sex. They also used field kits to take DNA samples from motorists fitting the profile of the killer during traffic stops and special operations.
Daytona Beach Police opened a serial killer hotline for those with tips and information. Investigators even met with several psychics, so they were grinding hard on this one.
They're working every angle.
Yeah.
No stone unturned, as they would say.
Daytona Police Chief Mike Chitwood was quoted as saying, quote, "Genetically, we know who you are and you can't escape that. Every night when you lay your head on your pillow, you're one night closer to having the SWAT team crushing through your door and ending this," unquote.
I love that. I love the Liam Neeson of it all. I don't know who you are. I have a set of skills, and I will kill you. I love that. So then, on March 7th, 2016, the body of Rachel Elizabeth Bay, 32 years old, was found dumped along Beeline Highway west of Jupiter, 180 miles south of Daytona Beach, and several miles from where she was last seen alive.
One of Rachel's brothers, Eliyahu Bay, described his sister as a loving and caring girl who got caught up with the wrong crowd as a teen. At one time, she had been a certified nursing assistant, but she ended up trying to survive by living and working on the street after getting deeper into drugs.
Eliyahu said, quote, "We all wanted to rescue and steal her away from Florida," he meant. "But we knew that choice had to be hers, and she wanted to have that kind of change," unquote. So she wanted to get better, but not enough to leave Florida.
Right.
Is that what I gather?
Yeah.
So according to Eliyahu, in their last phone conversation, Rachel asked when she would get to meet his children. So she's hopeful.
Yeah.
In that moment. She told him that life was hard, but she was trying.
Rachel was last seen by a friend walking along Dixie Highway at 2 a.m., not far from where Hayes lived in West Palm Beach. A road crew discovered Rachel's nude body about 6 hours later. She had been strangled to death. She had also been severely beaten and had a broken jaw and multiple broken teeth.
I mean, that's overkill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. He was very angry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Rachel also had defensive wounds, indicating that she fought back against her killer. Her clothes and cell phone were missing. DNA was found on the back of her left hand where her killer may have grabbed her to drag her to the spot where her body was found.
Phone records showed that Rachel's missing cell phone remained sporadically active in the days after she was killed. The cell tower that facilitated the majority of that activity was the cell tower that also covered Hayes' home.
That DNA found on Rachel's body was entered into a database, and in December of 2016, let me get my air horn ready.
Get it ready.
December of 2016 was matched to the DNA found on Laquita Gunther and Julie Green. We got him. Anyway, DNA finally came through. Investigators then turned to genetic genealogy, a technique that led to the capture of California's Golden State Killer in 2018.
Genetic genealogy uses DNA testing and traditional genealogical methods to determine biological relationships between people. The DNA was submitted to the genealogy database company GEDmatch, and eventually, with the information they received from GEDmatch, police zeroed in on Robert Hayes as a suspect.
However, they did not have his DNA, so they put him under surveillance. This paid off when they were able to collect a cigarette butt that Hayes discarded at a West Palm Beach bus stop, and the DNA from the cigarette was sent to a lab, and it matched. Woo! Got him.
The DNA not only connected Hayes to Rachel's murder, but also to Laquita Gunther and Julie Green. Ballistics made the third Daytona case against Hayes, connecting him to the murder of Iwana Patton, because the same gun was used on Laquita, Julie, and Iwana. The evidence was not as good in the case of the fourth victim, Stacy Gage.
Robert Tyrone Hayes, 37 years old, was arrested without incident at the West Palm Beach apartment that he shared with his girlfriend and their toddler. He was charged with first-degree murder in the strangulation death of Rachel Elizabeth Bay.
At a press conference following Hayes' arrest, authorities revealed that they were not expecting the perpetrator to be a black person due to the profile created by Tom Davis, who believed that the killer was white.
I wish I could have seen their faces.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that happens to me when I meet people after talking to them on the phone,
and you don't expect them to look like they look.
Well, no, they don't know that I'm black.
Oh,
I get that a lot.
I see what
People
you're saying.
don't know that I'm black. And I always love catching people's face, their reaction. And so I just wonder what their faces look like when they're like,
when they discovered.
That's a black guy.
Yeah.
What? I mean, what happened to did they explode? Did their brains explode? So anyway, Anissa Ferris, the niece of Iwana Patton, said, quote, "I think it's a shame because that blinded a lot of people, including the police, to be looking at a certain person that was not there. That detail put people off track," unquote.
So that's not surprising if you're a fruity, but if you're new here, the prevailing belief is that only white men are serial killers because the stereotype society has about BIPOC people is outside of the scope of a profile of a serial killer. It contributes to justice being delayed, and cases go cold or they never get solved at all.
So Hayes was transferred to Volusia County Jail, where he was charged with 3 additional counts of first-degree murder. So now let's hop on into the trial. What the what, Beth?
In 2022, more than 15 years after 3 women were found dead in Daytona Beach, Robert Hayes went to trial. Hayes' defense acknowledged that Hayes had sex with all 3 women, but insisted that it had been consensual and that Hayes didn't kill them. It was just a big coincidence.
Interesting take. Okay, but that didn't fly. You're not going to believe this. They didn't believe it. And he was found guilty of the murders of Laquita Gunther, Julie Green, and Iwana Patton, linked by DNA and ballistics. Mwah. You love it. You love to see DNA come through and bring these things to a close. So prosecutors sought the death penalty while Hayes' defense attorneys were hoping to spare his life.
Hayes' defense attorneys told the jury that Hayes had brain damage that could have led to a loss of self-control. Defense witness Dr. Joseph Chong-Seng Wu told jurors Hayes' brain showed damage in areas that regulate fear and aggression. He said that based on brain scans, he saw evidence of traumatic brain injuries and that Hayes was on the autism spectrum.
Prosecutor Jason Lewis asked jurors to recommend that Hayes be put to death. It's Florida, remember?
Right.
Recounting experts testifying for the state who said autism cannot be diagnosed on brain scans and that there were no signs of a brain injury. So it's just like a battle of the experts, and the jury just gets to decide.
Battle of the experts!
Yeah,
put them up, put them up. Yeah.
Boom! Pyrotechnics everywhere! All in the courtroom and stuff.
Throwing chairs.
That's how you win a trial.
So family members made impact statements. Laquita Gunther's eldest daughter, Guyette, said she and her siblings lost out on their chance to grow old with their mother. Julie Green's sister, Rhonda, told the court that part of her died with Julie, and the murder occurred when another sister of theirs had terminal cancer. Oh, my God.
That's awful.
Yeah.
Dr. Anissa Ferris, Iwana Patton's niece, read statements on behalf of the family. Iwana's sister described her as caring and someone who kept the peace. A nephew said Iwana left an impression because of her smiles.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
After a 3-day sentencing hearing and 7 hours of deliberation, a 12-member jury could not reach a unanimous decision. So the judge sentenced Hayes to 3 back-to-back life sentences.
All right, so now let's get into where are they now? I'll tell you. Hayes is still waiting to be tried separately for the murder of Rachel Bay. It does not look as though he will ever stand trial for the murder of Stacy Gage, another victim.
Right.
And there just wasn't enough evidence.
Yeah, and Stacy Gage's murder.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to look to see where he is being incarcerated, and I couldn't find it.
Okay. He's not at the Vesulia place?
I don't know. I searched the Florida Department of Corrections database, and I couldn't find him, so I don't know.
Okay.
On Christmas Eve, every year since Laquita Gunther was murdered, her friend Stacy Dittmer has held a candlelight vigil at the murder site with people who knew Laquita.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, so I'm going to move on. So Let's get into our takes. Beth, OG of True Crime, what do you think of this case?
So, from what his family said, there was a lot of abuse in the family.
Yeah.
His father died. His father was murdered. So
right.
There's some violence.
Yeah.
He was raised by his mother, who was a strict disciplinarian.
Right.
And they explained why.
Right.
I watched his sister talking on the stand, and she explained, she understood why her mom was such a strict disciplinarian.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want them to get killed.
Right.
But it was like really harsh discipline. There was beatings and burning and it was bad.
Yeah.
So I imagine that he probably harbored a lot of anger towards women.
Yes.
And it also sounds like he usually kept his emotions in check, because most people described him as being calm and collected, and he went to school and he did well and he seemed to be able to keep a job and all the stuff that a lot of serial killers can't do, he did.
Right.
So he was able to keep his emotions in check.
And even cool off for a period.
Yeah. He had a cooling off period for sure. And it may be that he just bottled his emotions, and he bottled them up to the point where he would occasionally explode when the conditions were right or wrong. Not sure how I should be saying that.
Yeah. No, when I came to this part of the story where I had to give my thoughts, I literally just said, I'm just going to wait for Beth, because I don't know. This case had a lot of, I hadn't seen that before. I'm not sure.
I mean, he seemed like a pretty normal guy.
Yeah.
And yet he's killing people. Very weird.
Could he be compared to, you've made
somebody like Ted Bundy?
Like Ted Bundy, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So thank you for all of your very, very well thought out takes, Beth. I agree with all of them. Let's see. I think all the things you think. It had something to do with whatever the doctor said at trial, that there's evidence of brain trauma on the scans and evidence of autism spectrum disorder. But I had some thoughts about the investigation. About
the profile and all that.
The profile of, there was a lot of assumptions, a lot of assuming.
Yeah.
And when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, and women continue to get murdered.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times, so there's a profiler. He or she creates a profile. That's just a tool. It's not something that this killer has to be white.
Right. Doesn't fit the box. Throw it out. No, that's not.
So I was going to mention, I shouted out a while back a British TV show called The Long Shadow.
Yeah.
About a UK murderer.
A real one.
Yeah, a real one. Okay. I can't remember what his moniker was, but the something Ripper. I can't remember.
Anyway, I remember my shock. There's another British
there's
Ripper?
Another Ripper. It was really good, and it was about the victims, and it was about the investigation, and one of the things that they did was there was a message left on like a recording device, and the person who left the message had an accent, what they called a Geordie accent, and they thought it was the killer. And so they were like, the killer has to have a Geordie accent. It wasn't the killer. I guess I shouldn't. Maybe
people in communities who had that accent? to try to find the killer?
I don't know, but they would dismiss suspects if they didn't.
Oh,
so,
well,
I mean,
accent can be faked anytime, mate.
Yeah. So they had interviewed the killer many times and dismissed him because he didn't have that accent.
Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? How these assumptions and inability to, like, people get a bee in their bonnet, law enforcement, prosecutors.
Yeah,
it happened this way.
What is that? Tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision.
Yeah, they get tunnel vision.
Thank you. Yes. And it ends up just preventing justice from being served or investigations to move forward to a conclusion. And I think contributed to the case going cold is these assumptions made, right? There was a lot of time where the family members and loved ones had no idea who killed their family member or what happened to them. And, you know, he still has to be tried for one of the murders. Yeah. It's taken a long time and it didn't have to. And that's frustrating for me. And it's got to be really painful for the victims.
The victim's family, yeah.
No surprise, the death penalty was pursued. This is Florida.
Yeah.
And also, just reminder, true crime is true for somebody. And I thought about, you know, his mom, who tried so hard to keep him out of trouble with her strict discipline.
Yeah.
And one of his siblings testified at trial.
Yeah.
Like as a character witness. But, you know, this mother of this guy who did something really bad, I'm sure she still loves her son.
Yeah.
So I thought about that. And his siblings. I'm sure there are still people in this world who love him and don't believe that he is forever going to be as bad as his worst deeds. Fine.
Yeah.
But it was just a thought I had. I have no idea how his family feels. But again, true crime, it's not just the victims and it's not just the family members who are left behind. There's like a whole, because of this tragedy, there's a whole, like,
I can't
think of a better word, a whole ecosystem of people who are touched by this really fucked up thing.
Yeah.
And so that's it for my takes.
Okay.
You tell us, Fruities, what you think of the case.
Beth, where can the people find us?
Our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use Fruit Loops Pod for all of our social media.
This is a weekly podcast, and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.
Hi, I'm Sean McCabe.
And I'm Carrie McCabe.
We are, well, married, obviously, but we're also obsessed with the darker side of things.
True crime stories, alien abductions, poltergeists. If it leaves you scratching your head and keeping those lights on at night, we want to hear about it.
That's why we host the podcast, Ain't It Scary, with Sean and Carrie.
Every week, we bring our listeners a true story guaranteed to send chills down your spine. From history's most brutal serial killers to the mystery of spontaneous human combustion.
Yep, lots of these stories leave unanswered questions behind, and you'll get to poke through the rubble of the evidence with a hardened skeptic and
someone whose mind is more open to fun.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
You can find Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie wherever you get your podcasts, and on social media at Ain't It Scary. Come play with us.
Hi, I'm Matt Harris. Seton Tucker and I host the podcast Impact of Influence, which for 2 years covered in depth Alec Murdaugh, who was eventually convicted in 2023 of murdering his wife Maggie and son Paul. That story continues to evolve, and we will cover that. Plus, we will tell you stories of other true crime events that have happened in the South. Please join us on Impact of Influence. And give us a follow on the Impact of Influence Facebook page.